is now being recorded.
I'll remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and our microphones are very sensitive, so they will likely pick up anything you say near a microphone for posterity. So this is the 8th meeting of the Governor's Water Augmentation Council. Again, we have the task of investigating long-term water augmentation strategies, additional water conservation opportunities, and funding and infrastructure needs to help secure water supplies for Arizona's future. We're going to start by going around the table, followed by going around the room, go on to the phone, so that the council members can state their names and titles. And my staff.
Zach Richards, AWR, Statewide Planning.
Wade Noble, Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition.
Grady Gamage, Gamage and Burnham.
Kevin Rogers, Arizona Cotton Growers Association.
Pat Graham, the Nature Conservancy.
Dave Roberts with Salt River Project. Warren Tenney, Arizona Municipal Water Users Association.
Virginia O'Connell, Arizona Water Bank. Sarah Porter, Kyle Center for Water Policy.
Chris Udall, Agribusiness Water Council of Arizona.
Maureen George, Mojave County Water Authority.
Bob Lotz, Arizona Public Service Company.
John Kamik, Southern Arizona Water Users Association.
Craig Sullivan, County Supervisors Association.
Hunter Moore, Governor's Office.
Thanks. Do we have council members on the phone?
Philip Townsend.
Camacho.
Sorry. 2 people talking at once. Can you repeat that?
Philip Townsend, Sunland Chemical.
Chris Camacho, Greater Phoenix Economic Council.
Anyone else? Thanks. I'll remind those on the phone that it would help if you mute your phones until we ask you to weigh in on the agenda items. It'll make it easier for all of us to hear here in the room and for you to hear us. So I think you all should have an agenda, and I know we posted the agenda online. We have another council member running in. Would you like to introduce yourself before we start on the agenda?
Sandy Favorites, Freeport.
Thanks. So I just want to say it's been quite a while since we've had a meeting of the entire council. I know some of the committees have met. I think some of the reasons for the delay in the council meeting relate back to the Governor Ducey's Water Solutions conversation, which has taken up a lot of our time here at the department, a lot of the governor's office time, and many people that are around this table and in the audience. And the first agenda item that we do have is for me to give you an update on that process. So about a year ago this time, DWR and the governor's office started talking about the water issues that DWR had been working on and that DWR was aware of. We then started reaching out with various stakeholders around the state to get their perspective on what their water issues were, what the challenges were facing the state, and started talking about how we might be able to address those water challenges in a relatively short period of time. We certainly knew that the Water Augmentation Council and the Water Initiative were ongoing processes that were probably going to bear fruit over a longer time period than what the Governor's Water Solutions conversation process was intended to do. In June of 2017, we had the first public meeting of the process. It was chaired by Governor Ducey, and it was with the group called the Plenary. The Plenary consisted, again, of a wide range of stakeholders from across the state: tribal, industrial, irrigation districts, agriculture, cities, hopefully I'm not leaving anyone out, counties, etc. Also invited were the Speaker and President from the legislature, and they did have some of their staff participate. We then created 2 work groups, a Colorado River Issues work group and a Groundwater Issues work group, and those work groups were created expressly because of the issues the state was already aware of, but also because of what we heard as we kind of did our due diligence leading up to the creation of the process. So throughout the summer, between June and October, we had, I think, probably 1 meeting a week, either the work group for the Colorado River or the work group on groundwater. We supplemented the membership of those 2 work groups beyond just the plenary members. I think we ended up with somewhere close to 30 on Colorado River and pushing 40 on the groundwater issues. One of the sideboards of how the work groups was to operate is that those entities who were invited members would have a seat at the table. They were certainly invited and able to bring staff with them, but we asked that each entity have 1 spokesperson. Those entities were also allowed to bring constituents, their fellow constituents, whether they were from their organization specifically or not, into the room as well. So that was a way for us to try to expand as much as we could the process, but still keep the process somewhat manageable and moving forward. And so we worked on a whole variety of issues over those work group meetings. I think there were probably something like 25 major issues that were thrown out onto the table. Maybe about half of them made it to the plenary with a large amount of consensus. Again, a combination of Colorado River and groundwater issues. At that point, in mid-October, we started looking at what issues might move forward legislatively. DWR and the governor's office started having meetings with individual legislators. I think probably we talked over that time period, October, November, December, to at least 30 or so legislators about the likelihood of various proposals moving forward, and are still in those discussions at the legislature now with leadership, committee leadership, and others on what a package might look like. And again, the ultimate goal of this step of the process was to find a package that might make it through the legislature. The ultimate goal of the process in itself was to look out a couple of generations at least, do a real in-depth look at our water law, and try to set up the future generations for the same success that we have enjoyed based on prior actions taken by a whole bunch of different political leadership at both the state level and the federal level. So some of the things we heard from the legislators as we were doing our due diligence in that vein were that they didn't want to see a really long, complicated package. It's an election year. They were hoping for a relatively short session, and so they really were asking us to put together more of a minimalist package, things that are really pressing for this legislative session. And so we took that to heart, and as we've been discussing what might move forward, things that don't really need to be done right now, various items where certain things sunset in 2025, for example, pursuant to the groundwater code, they became less important in the discussion than things that we thought needed to be done right now. Dealing with the health of Lake Mead and the Colorado River is one of the high priority items. Some other things related to groundwater issues in Pinal County, and the fact that the physical availability for most of the water in Pinal County is tied up in various permit processes. So those are the kind of things we're talking about with the legislature in the short term. We do not have details yet of what a package might look like, but we continue to work on that as we speak. So, Hunter Moore from the Governor's Office, do you want to add anything about the process or additional comments?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. First of all, I'd like to say that for the entirety of the Governor's, sounds like a hot mic, for the entirety of the Governor's administration, he's made sure that water has been a topic of top import. From the very first year that he was in office to now, it's been something that he has discussed publicly, has asked people to engage on, both here at ADWR, going out and working with people across the state, this council, and the conversation that we started earlier this year. I think it's safe to say that everyone in Arizona takes the approach that we never check the box next to water. This is something that always needs to be discussed. I think that was part of the reason that the governor asked us to take this kind of approach, is to thoughtfully begin working on ideas and concepts early in the administration, honing in on issues that are important as through the process that Tom described, and getting to a place where we can have a conversation with the legislature about items that have been raised. We're very grateful to Mrs. Griffin and to Mr. Bowers, who are chairing the committees that these concepts would likely go through. We've been talking with them, asking them to take a look at the things that have been presented. They've been very thoughtful in considering those. I think for myself, just a personal observation, the fact that we are having these types of discussions has engendered a great deal of appreciation amongst the business community, amongst other stakeholders across the state, to appreciate the fact that we have been in a drought, that we are very well prepared because of what has taken place in the past, and there is a need to make sure that we are that prepared, if not better, for the future. So with that, Director, I'll turn the time back over to you, but I would like to thank everybody who's been part of the process so far and encourage further discussion.
Thanks, Hunter. I'll share some of my observations about what I see as some of the already existing successes of the process, setting aside where we're at in the legislature. And so Juan and Hunter kind of went there. It has definitely increased the awareness and interest in water issues across the state with the media and at the legislature. I think Representative Nutt held a DSAL conference at the legislature recently. Senator Otondo has a series of weekly lunching meetings that are going to help educate the legislators on a whole variety of water issues. I already did my thing. I know CAWCD and Wade Noble and a bunch of other folks, Bass, AHA, home builders, a whole bunch of people are going to have a chance on a weekly basis in those meetings to help educate the legislature about their issues, their industry, et cetera. So I think that is a really good thing. I think for many years, as I've been part of these processes, one of our great wants was to be able to have a greater level of knowledge down at the legislature, and certainly it is raising awareness there. I think we had great participation in the work groups and in the breakout meetings, which addressed specific issues raised in the work groups. Breakout meetings also gave folks an opportunity to expand the participation, and you know, the fact that that was occurring throughout the summer when people are normally wanting to go off on their vacations. You know, I think a lot of people didn't do that on purpose just to be at those meetings. So we very much appreciate that, and again, indication of the strong interest in all these issues. We did get reasonably good consensus on a lot of issues, although we never came close to unanimous consent on any one issue. And certainly there was a very widespread recognition of the need to take some action, again, on our Lake Mead, Colorado River issues and on the Pinal Active Management Area physical availability issues. So with that, I will offer up to members of the council in the room, anyone that would like to comment or ask questions. I see none from members of the council at this point in time. I'll ask for folks on the telephone who are members of the council if they have any questions or comments. I am not hearing any. I did see a hand go up in the audience, and we do have a public comment period at the end of the agenda, but to do this in context, I am happy to take your questions or comments right now. So if you could come to one of the microphones, that would be helpful so folks on the phone can hear.
On your groundwater committee that was La Paz County was presented.
Sorry, could you identify yourself, please?
Rogine DeYoung from La Paz County. On La Paz County, the only representative I saw on the groundwater was Rose Law Firm. I do not feel like that was the only representation that should have been placed on that particular committee. There's other interests, and I would like to know why.
There were additional entities that were representative of groundwater use in La Paz County. We had Craig Sullivan from the County Board of Supervisors. I know that representatives of the Fondamente Farms were in the room. So again, we had to balance the right level of participation in a process that was statewide and have a number of people in the room that was workable. We thought that we achieved that goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ma'am, I'd be happy to visit with you after the meeting to talk a little bit about how La Paz's issues were represented in the discussion. My name is Craig Sullivan. I work with the County Supervisors Association, so I'd enjoy talking with you.
Thanks. Brad Hill.
Yeah, good morning. Brad Hill with the City of Flagstaff. One of the initiatives we were on the Groundwater Working Group was actually a rulemaking proposal about dealing with the physical availability of the Coconino and the Redwall aquifers. Can you provide any context to when you think you will officially open a docket to look at that rule?
So I think we are in the process of working through the rule moratorium exemption process with the governor's office. We will probably be able to get through that process reasonably quickly. And again, apologize for some of the delay there, but we're focusing right now on the legislative package because we have a short window of opportunity there to try to get that together for this session. So it won't be too long, Brad, before we get to that. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will close that agenda item and move on to committee updates. And I think the first update is from Bob Lotz and the Desalination Committee.
Thank you, Directors. The Desalination Committee has met several times since the last GWEC meeting. We had initially identified 9 areas to look at and built a matrix to hone those down. At the end of the day, we came down to 3 areas that we would continue to look at and focus on, and those areas were in the Yuma area, the West Valley, and the Loop Winslow area. Each one has pros and cons, of course, to it, and right now we're working with the community leaders, stakeholders in each one of those areas to identify areas of concern, interest, and how we could actually have a project that might benefit and be accepted in those areas. Another area that we talked about early on was the waste stream. And inland desal has a huge issue with what do you do with the waste stream. ADEQ, Ms. Hale's office, reached out to me on looking at deep well injection, and so we're looking at that in different areas as well. So we'll continue to do some research on that.
Thanks, Bob. And I'll just add that yesterday I was in Tijuana at a meeting of the binational work group for desalination pursuant to minute 323. I'm the co-chair for the U.S. members of that work group. The Sonoran co-chair, Sergio Avila, mentioned that there was a new technology that they're looking at that severely reduces that waste stream, and invited us at some point over the next month to go down to Rocky Point for a presentation from the folks working on that. So it might be good we can share that information when that happens, and maybe there's a potential path forward to deal with that brine disposal issue through that methodology.
That would be great. I mean, I know there's a lot of people looking at that as an issue, and any insight that anybody has is definitely accepted.
So any members of the council around the table have questions or comments for Bob? How about any members on the phone? Not hearing any then. Thanks, Bob. And we will move on to Maureen George and an update on the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee's work.
As well as factors that we would want to look at, such as yield, cost efficiency, levelized cost per acre, environmental considerations, permitting, and other issues that might be involved, local support. One of the things I want to make important about this is that we are only looking at preparing a portfolio of options for local planning areas to consider. We are not developing a plan for local areas. We are not suggesting these are what local areas do. We are merely trying to provide a resource of things that might be available in any given area. The next step after this study would be done would be then to take the study out to local areas, provide them the information, and then they could either proceed with anything in that report or not, as they would choose to do. Based on that matrix we developed, we prepared a scope of work. We used the state's available contractor list and sent that scope of work out. We received a proposal from Corolla Engineers. We have interviewed with them, and we are proceeding forward with them to develop that portfolio of short and long-term augmentation options. The funding from that has come from DWR. Initially, we are also in the process of applying for a federal grant. We are simply waiting for that grant to open, but we have been encouraged to apply, and we are hoping that we could proceed with additional information. Once that scope of work is finalized and we are moving forward, I'll be sure that the entire council gets a copy of the scope of work. As we move forward, the members of the Long-Term Desal Committee will be getting drafts as we proceed to comment on, and obviously we will update this group as it continues to meet. Thank you.
So I'll add a couple things, and I will ask for the indulgence of this council. Normally, before we put that scope of work out and approved that and committed my money to that process, we would have asked for feedback from the council, but we needed to get that going, and we had to cancel the last council meeting because of conflict. So I hope folks can understand that that's why we move forward, just to try to keep things moving. I will also say that at the end of 2017, in December, there was a report due from DWR and the State Land Department pursuant to legislation, and it directed us to look at potential sites on state land to build either storage reservoirs above ground or to do underground storage. So that report is done. We would like, Maureen, for you to take a look at that report and see if it has any utility for your committee.
Great. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Thanks. So any questions for Maureen from the committee members in the room? How about council members on the phone? Hearing none, we'll move on to Sandy Favorites and the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. The Finance Committee has not met in quite a while. I think there has been one meeting since the last meeting of this group. We continue to look at different funding options, having presentations from different folks on opportunities for creative financing of water projects. We can continue to do that. Another item of discussion and continues to be sort of an outstanding item was a matrix that was developed that Maureen is also utilizing for her work on areas of the state in most need of augmentation projects. So we're still working through that matrix, and I can't say when we'll have a next meeting. We just need to get that scheduled and on the books. Been waiting a little bit through the summer process that we were working through, and part of this legislative session. So the other item of interest for the Finance Committee would also be anything coming out of Maureen's committee or any of the other committees. If there is a need to look at a specific type of project and how that would be financed, that we're waiting on those to come to the Finance Committee as well.
Thanks, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy? Council members around the table? Council members on the phone? Hearing none, we will move on to the next report. John Kamik from the Recycled Water Committee, and I want to point out that there's two potential action items that John will cover that we'll ask the council to look at and potentially take action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. 2017, over the last several months since we last met, the Recycled Water Committee has met at least 3 times. In May, we addressed one of the items we talked about was the current regulations regarding long-term storage credit accrual for managed recharge facility, as well as we also talked about the 2025 sunset. And like Mr. Chair said, we'll get into those a little more in depth after the committee reports. But during that meeting, Warren Tinney of AMWA was able to present their perspective on managed recharge, as well as Tim Tomier of Tucson Water and Joel Olson of Metro Water were representing Southern Arizona there as well. In July, on July 27th, the council also met to discuss another topic we're looking at, and that is the One Water concept. This is a concept that's gaining attention as far as integrated water management planning for communities. We had a presentation from Ms. Erin Young from the City of Flagstaff in their water department, as well as Dr. Channa Rock, who was representing Water Reuse Arizona, on the importance of One Water policy implications for the state of Arizona and how best to possibly move forward. Followed that July meeting, we did have those recommendations that we'll deal with momentarily put forth, and those then were subsequently sent forward to the chair of this committee for consideration. More recently, in November, I met with Chuck Graff and technical staff from both the Department of Water Resources as well as the Department of Environmental Quality. When dealing with recycled water, dealing with both those departments is important, since many of the changes will affect possible rules within the Department of Environmental Quality. It was a good meeting, and we did get on and focus a lot of our attention on integrated water management planning for urban areas, in particular on-site non-potable reuse in industrial and commercial settings, where Arizona could obviously have some guidance and move forward with that in the future. Another update, and this was earlier, a topic that was brought up earlier after the Blue Ribbon panel and mentioned at the beginning of this council, was removing the prohibition on direct potable reuse. That has been done recently, and as well as the stakeholder groups associated with Water Reuse Arizona have presented to ADEQ a guidance document on how to implement direct potable reuse in the state of Arizona. So that's in ADEQ's hands for potential rulemaking coming up. And finally, for those who wish to stick around, there will be a recycled water meeting at 1 o'clock where we're going to have a guest presenter from California who will be getting more in depth on One Water and the integrated water management.
Thank you. Any questions for John at this point from the council members around the table? Council members on the phone? Hearing none, John, do you want to move into the discussion of the potential action on recommendation regarding elimination of the 2025 sunset for accrual of long-term storage credits for effluent?
I do.
Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. Over the course of the last year, the Recycled Water Committee has spent significant amounts of time studying these issues of effluent credits. During these discussions, two dominant themes or concerns by stakeholders of effluent entitlements rose to the point of a detailed discussions and approved resolutions to put forth to the full GWAC to consider. The first issue was the creation of effluent credits within the AMAs of the state. Under current statute, effluent credit generation for renewable resource offsets are discontinued after the year 2025. Essentially, any reclaimed water project that stores water for future use becomes obsolete after this year. These include large-scale underground storage facilities, injection wells, spreading basins, etc. These investments, if effluent can no longer generate groundwater credits, become useless as an incentive to return water to the aquifer. During the course of our discussions, the committee could find no one who supported this sunset as good water policy for the state moving forward. Hence, a resolution from our committee to correct the statute limiting the creation of long-term storage credits from effluent was unanimously approved, and it reads, Resolution RWC 2017-001, in order to ensure the proper stewardship of Arizona's water management and the economic vitality of the state, the RWC moves to the GWAC for consideration and recommended approval for the elimination of the year 2025 sunset of the long-term storage credit accrual derived from effluent. The second issue that generated a tremendous amount of discussion was the discussion on managed underground recharge facilities and the value of effluent generated from this aquifer recharge scheme. Under current statutes, any effluent recharge in a managed project is subject to a 50% cut to the aquifer prior to its long-term storage credit generation, or actually when it's delivered. This serves as a disincentive to the managed recharge of effluent. You may ask, why is this topic intensely discussed? Because effluent is the only water that the 50% cut pertains to within the state. Stepping back, let's review what a managed underground recharge facility is. A managed underground recharge facility is a storage facility that uses natural recharge areas for the storage project. This generally comes as either a stream bed or a river course, mainly ephemeral in classification. Effluent that is discharged to one of these facilities is measured not only in volume release, but also measured as far as infiltration, losses due to evaporation or evapotranspiration, and losses based on any water that leaves the defined facility area. This could include the downstream end of the project or any legal diversions within the facility. In review of the time frame of when the provision was created regarding managed underground storage facilities, ADWR staff was asked to research the understanding behind this provision. Without any direct formulation of how 50% came to be in the records, the staff only found information regarding the positions at the time of 100% or 0%. This leads one to decipher that the 50% may actually have been let's split the baby down the middle compromise at the time. However, this 50% is not a provision placed on all water, but a deliberate provision placed only on one class of water, wastewater effluent. Fast forward many years, and this 50% cut to the aquifer for effluent becomes an impediment to sustainable water management, primarily because as the state and its residents have a better understanding of how the urban water cycle works, the value of all waters, effluent, groundwater, surface water, Colorado River water, etc., are now viewed similarly. Based on the provision of the 50% cut to the aquifer for effluent and the increasing economic value of water, many communities that store effluent within a managed project are being pushed to remove their water from the environment and instead place their effluent in a constructed off-channel project. The decision to go to a constructed project then starves the local environment of water used for habitat and other amenities that the community may enjoy in a natural setting. Even though the water may recharge the same aquifer within the active management area, placing the water in a controlled environment off-channel provides a 50% increase in credits accrued, essentially encouraging a local economy to spend millions of dollars in capital infrastructure to support in action the creation of that project, that in turn hurts other amenities within the community, removing that water from the natural setting. Many members that participated in the committee discussions believe that a win-win situation can be found if effluent was treated equally like any other water source. Aquifers are recharged similarly both in managed and constructed facilities, and the owners of water should achieve the same benefits regardless of the method of recharge used. This is currently true for all waters except effluent. The committee members unanimously voted to put forth the following resolution to end the current statutory discrimination of effluent, and it will read, Resolution RWC 2017-002, in order for the state to continue to lead on water resource policy management and recognize that all water has value, the RWC moves to the GWAC for consideration and the recommended approval that the cut to the aquifer for effluent delivered from a managed recharge facility be established as 0% for annual storage and recovery and 5% for long-term storage accrual. Mr. Chair, that concludes my introductions on these topics. There are several members of the Recycled Water Committee and myself are in favor of advancing these two changes within the GWAC process. I'll turn it over to you.
So before I ask for discussion, and we'll take the 2025 sunset first and then the managed recharge for effluent second. But from my understanding, if the GWAC makes the recommendation is made to the director. The director would then pass that recommendation on to the governor. Essentially, that's the way the council is set up. So with that as background, I will ask council members on the sunset for the effluent if they have thoughts, comments, questions, and have some discussion about that first. So folks around the table. Warren.
Yes, before addressing on the 2025 sunset, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge appreciation for the work that the committees have been doing. I think they've really helped advance a lot of what we have wanted to see as a council in looking at water augmentation as a long-term and feel like each of the committees have been moving forward in a real positive way to address that goal of looking at the long-term water augmentation needs for our state. Specifically regarding on the 2025 sunset for the accrual of long-term storage credits for effluent, the AMWA cities are very supportive of this. They would very much like to see this accomplished sooner than later. While 2025 is 7 years away, there's much planning and investments that go into projects that would utilize effluent, and it would be helpful to have that certainty when it comes to those credits from recharging effluent. And so we're definitely supportive of this and agree. It was recognized in the strategic vision that the department did in, I believe, 2014 or 2015, that this was an important issue, and we are very much supportive of the Recycled Water Committee's recommendation.
Dave?
Tom and members of the council, Salt River Project, if you recall, when this issue was talked within the governor's water solutions conversation, this topic was raised, and we also raised it from the standpoint, or commented on it from the standpoint that this elimination of the state is part of the definition of water bud, which has been a topic of discussion for the last several years about repealing that entire definition within the statute. Salt River Project is supportive of this piece, obviously. I mean, we have a lot of customers that Warren represents, and we believe it's important relative to the overall management of water in the AMAs. But we also think that the entire water bud definition ought to be repealed because of its impact on some of the small rural water users in the active management areas. And one of the questions I have relative to just this specific repeal is about how it might affect some of those smaller water providers who are also impacted by water bud. For example, the city of Buckeye and the city of Queen Creek, who who can't earn long-term storage credits if they were to recharge their effluent because of the entire water bud definition itself. So I'd like for some consideration of that as you consider this going forward, Tom, about how the entire repeal of water bud might be looked at relative to this repeal here. But we are supportive of this narrow piece. We just think that a discussion of repealing the entire water bud definition should be considered. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. And as Dave mentioned, this issue was brought up in the governor's process, and I think there was very strong support throughout the work group members. We did hear Solar Project's concern there about water bud and as well, and we'll definitely consider the water bud piece, and we know that we have more work to do on water bud. Many of the issues that we talked about in the work groups and at the plenary, if they're not satisfactorily dealt with this session in the legislature, I think we certainly know that they need to be worked on continually out into the future till we come to some resolution. This process of reviewing water law and policy needs to happen, and I heard a legislator say this, or actually, sorry, it wasn't a legislature, it was Sarah at the function last week. Every day, every month, every year, basically, and I think I took that to heart very much, and that's what I think we're all here for, to make that happen. So I'll ask other members of the council if they want to weigh in on this, and if they want to weigh in on the water bud part as well that they brought up. Ted.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, don't have any comments on waterbed specifically. We don't have a position on that one way or the other. But as owners and operators of several underground recharge projects and partners and others, we think that the elimination of the 2025 limitation is a great idea, not just to continue to be able to create value out of effluent, but also to continue to create value out of this infrastructure that has been put into place. I'd like to echo Warren's comments as well as far as the work of the committees. We're all busy, and to see that even with the kind of intermission that we've had at the council level, that work has continued by busy people. I'd like to commend all the committees on that. And when I listen to the description of the work that's gone on, I'm more familiar with some of it than with others based on our involvement on the individual committees. Only John's committee came up with resolutions, but important work is happening in all of these. And what I'd like to hear is about the collaboration, importantly, the research. Why is this thing the way that it is now before we decide that it needs to change? Consensus building, discussion, those type of things, so that when the committees come up with a recommendation, it's been thoroughly vetted, thought out, and all the words that we've heard this morning, thoughtful and all those type of things, are true. So thank you very much, all of you, all committee chairs and members, for that very thorough, high-quality work.
Thanks, Ted. Others around the table? Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo the support for the sunset, the removal of the sunset, or on the effluent in 2025. I do, however, echo Mr. Roberts' statements on the water bud and would be fully supportive of a package that includes both of those options. I think water bud is one of the biggest inhibitors to augmentation of water supplies in the state, or at least in the active management areas, and the work that Maureen's group is doing. Some of these smaller communities, they may not be able to get large entitlements to alternative water supplies, and water bud would almost wipe them out or completely keep them from considering doing those things. So I think water bud is just as important as the sunset of the 2025 on effluent. Thanks.
Cheryl.
I want to echo the support for the elimination of the sunset. And also we've had quite a bit of meetings with SRP in terms of water bud and as well with the Governor's Solution Group, and we do want to continue with that dialogue, and that's very important.
Anyone else around the table? Any council member on the phone? At this time, then I'll offer up any commenters from the audience. First, though, I would like to let everyone know that I did receive an email from Jeff Odefee, the Director of Clean Water Supply Programs for American Rivers, who is supportive of this proposal, this recommendation. Anyone from the audience? Yes, I can't see who you are. Oh, okay, come on. If you could come to the microphone. You got a microphone?
Microphone came to me, made it even easier. Good morning, Chairman, members of the Council. My name is Alex Smith. I'm the Deputy Area Manager of Bureau of Reclamation's Phoenix Area Office. Just would like to take a few moments to speak in support of this proposal. As many know, it's a proposal that has been of great interest to Reclamation for a number of years. We have obligations to the San Javier and Choctaw districts, the Tohono O'odham Nation, as a result of the Southern Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act, as well as the Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act of 2004. Those require us to establish a co-op fund to pay for water deliveries to those districts, as well as firm 28,200 acre-feet a year of NIA priority water for those districts. We also receive, by contract with the City of Tucson, 28,200 acre-feet a year of effluent out of their facilities. We use that effluent to store, in cooperation with Tucson area agencies, on managed recharge projects along the Santa Cruz River. So it clearly is important to Reclamation, as well as the nation and other Tucson area folks, for this proposal. We also feel, as others have mentioned, that a fair amount of infrastructure investment has gone into these projects and other projects around the state, and it's important to be able to continue those investments and plan for the future. There are future projects that have been proposed that really work to serve to enhance the values of some of these urban rivers. For example, Tucson has their Santa Cruz River Heritage Project, and then here through the valley there is significant discussion about Rio Salado 2.0 and that project, and we feel that this proposal may benefit both of those projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Anyone else? Yes.
Good morning. I'm Sonia Perillo. I'm the Executive Director of Audubon, Arizona, and I want to thank you for your work on this. We participated in one of the Recycled Water Committee meetings and have tracked the rest. And we are supportive of both of these proposals, and I'll limit my remarks here to this one. We recognize that many of the wildlife habitats that we care about in Arizona are effluent dependent, and we also recognize the value of certainty and long-term investments. So for those reasons, we think that this resolution in particular is very important for the wildlife habitats that we're working to protect. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Good morning, Andrew Greenhill on behalf of the City of Tucson and Tucson Water. I want to thank the Recycled Water Committee for these resolutions and just want to express our strong support for both proposals. They reflect wise water management for all the reasons that have been mentioned, as well as recognizing the wide-ranging value of effluent.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll keep the support for both in mind when we get to the discussion of the second one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Christina McPhee. I am the co-chair of the Community Water Coalition in Tucson, Arizona. I work with others in terms of the Sustainable Water Working Group statewide, and I speak in behalf of all of us that this type of long-term certainty the ability to plan for the future, the ability to fully use all of our water resources, to treat them equitably, and to make whole the promises kept to both First Nations and the commitments of the BOR are critical to our community and to our state moving forward. We thank you for your consideration. We stand in support of both these resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Warren.
Tom, I just wanted to, or excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add.
How dare you?
I just wanted to add that we are supportive of further exploring and looking at how to address waterbud or the removal of waterbud. Waterbud impacts or deals with not just effluent and recycled water, it deals with other water, and it certainly has an opportunity by removing that of increasing augmentation opportunities for smaller water users that haven't to this point. We're just are hesitant of having this proposal tied are completely linked to also the removal of waterbud because of concerns that different issues have been raised over time of concerns on removing of waterbud, and we don't want to see this proposal slowed down due to any issues with removal of waterbud. And so if we can move them along the same track, that's great, but we feel strongly that it's important that the removal of the 2025 sunset for effluent be its own proposal. Again, we are supportive of working to seek to have the removal of waterbud, but we just would like to see this separate.
Thanks, Warren. So I know that folks around the room who are concerned about the waterbed repeal and folks who are not in the room who have that same concern have been talking. There's been talks. I encourage you to keep talking and to try to come to some accommodation. I will say that at this point in time, it looks unlikely that the 2025 sunset, which did come out of the work group discussion, out of the governor's discussion, is going to move forward in this session as part of a package. Again, going back to legislators asking for the smallest package possible, the least confusing and difficult package as possible, and the fact that this sunsetting thing really is 2025, all those things kind of led to what I just said about the lack of likelihood that it's going to move forward. So you will have time to continue working with your fellow water wonks on this issue and on the repeal of waterbud. So any other comments? I see a hand raised.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Council. Good morning. I had
Could I ask you to identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Jerry Carlisle. I'm currently Vice Chairman of the Centerville District of the Augmentation Nation. And I would like to say thank you for everything. And the presentation that I handed out as on letterhead was also written up. But what you had addressed is exactly what we were wanting. So we want to thank you. And BOR has been working diligently with us in Centerville to meet all the needs of the Centerville District. So I want to say thank you to them and for all the things that they've done. And we still got a long ways to go. Just to give you a little history, my mother was the original plaintiff for the lawsuits that happened in Tucson, the Augmentation and also with the government. And CAP was one of the results that came all the way down so that my mother could see the farms that she farmed when she was a little girl come back to life. So this is one of the things that she was really grateful for before she passed away. to actually see those farms. I'm just letting you know that we want to thank all those that had a hand in it, especially with BOR helping us work and rehab our farms. Like I said, we still got a long ways to go. We still need to make sure that our children and our children's children and our children's children are still going to have water and still be able to see those crops come up during that time. So I want to thank you all for working on this. We talked about the 95%, and then so this is some of the things that we were discussing and that I was going to address. But since you addressed it, thank you very much. So we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to say thank you for addressing the council. As we move forward into the future, and I've said this in many places many times, we need all hands on deck. We don't often have representatives of any of the Indian communities come to the meetings like this and speak. We're trying to fix that and encourage them to do so, so I really appreciate you coming and your comments. Anyone else on the first recommendation? Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Singleton, Pinal County Water Augmentation Authority, and we wholeheartedly support removing the 2025 date as an impediment to good water management. I would echo Warren Tenney's thoughts on that, where as soon as we can keep that moving through the process, the better. We'll continuing to study water budget, possibly on a parallel track. I'd also like to make the point, well, I understand and can appreciate that there could be a limited number of proposals that the legislature could consider this year as part of a water package, but there actually is a timeliness issue to this particular proposal. Warren mentioned it earlier. There's infrastructure and funding decisions being made now that date is affecting and has already affected. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? So having heard the discussion, and I think we're kind of working through this council on a consensus basis, I heard no opposition, so we will take the recommendation under advisement, and I will pass that recommendation on formally to the governor's office. Hunter's here, but we will do it formally. So I will move on then to the second recommendation regarding the change in the cut to the aquifer for effluent stored at managed recharge facilities. And I want to make sure that I understand the recommendation is to make the effluent that the requirements or the cuts to the aquifer for the managed recharge effluent the same as the cuts to the aquifer for the constructed facilities. So 0% for annual storage and recovery, 5% for long-term storage credits. Is that the recommendation?
Mr. Chair, the recommendation was to make it consistent with CAP in a managed facility, which I think is 0% and 5% for long-term storage credits.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So with that, comments by council members around the table? Ted.
We support this recommendation as well.
Anyone else? Warren?
Tom, Amwa cities aren't currently looking at managed recharge or a managed recharge project regarding effluent. However, we did do a analysis looking at this issue and feel, based on that work, feel that it is important to have this tool there, and it's one more effort to advance the importance of all water and see that it is being utilized. So we are supportive.
Thanks, Warren. Pat.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your work on this, John, and the committee. Just if you could help me understand just a little bit better the rationale relative to the environment, how this improves the environment or would allow for improved environment versus not doing it.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Patrick, what it is, we're managed recharge facilities, and we'll use the ones in southern Arizona in particular. As the wastewater is released back into its natural courses or the environment of southern Arizona and the Santa Cruz River, there is a 50% cut to the aquifer at that time. It does create habitat restoration and maintains the habitat along the Santa Cruz River for many miles, I think upwards of over 20 miles. But as water managers and also as the Bureau and others who own those effluent entitlements in the river, as water becomes more valuable and our long-range processes continue, if we can get twice the amount by pulling it out of the river and putting it into a constructed channel, we have to look at that option. However, that ends up hurting the environment that's currently being enhanced by the discharges that are occurring. By pulling it off and put it into a constructed channel, you're still recharging the same aquifer as you are in defending what's happening in the managed project. One's constructed where it may be square basins, where the managed project is the natural river course or stream bed. But it still benefits the same aquifer, and it has to be measured to benefit the same aquifer as part of the rules guiding it right now.
Just one last clarification. So the water, though, that is flowing down the river that's benefiting from the recharge, how does the community, if water is more valuable to the community, that seems like water that's lost for them to be able to utilize, that they would be able to utilize if they put it into a constructed. That's what I'm having a little bit trouble understanding, the benefit to the city.
The credit generation of the water, either it's recharged in the stream bed or recharged would be the same under this proposal.
Okay.
So by leaving it in the river and having a multi-benefit societally and environmentally is the recommendation.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So let me jump in, and again, whatever the council recommends, I will pass on, but I will say this, and I think maybe, Pat, what you're getting at is the fact that a long-term storage credit can be pumped in a location other than the location that the credit is created. So to me, there's an issue there with this proposal, and I'll just add, I think John correctly recounted what we've been able to find at the department about the history of this, but I will point out that in the water budgets for the AMAs, looking at safe yield, this component of effluent is definitely a part of that, and creating those long-term storage credits will change that component of that water budget for the Tucson AMA if it's just for the Tucson AMA. So I saw some other hands up. Grady?
Mr. Chairman, I think you answered part of my question, but I'm still trying to figure out why there would have been this differentiation in the first place. Is it the result of the locational recovery difference, or is it that when you put water in a natural water course, a fair amount of that water is going to be consumed by the flora that grows in that water course? When you put it in a constructed basin, it's all going to go to the aquifer, absent evaporation. There's not going to be any plant, so there's a different benefit, arguably, in terms of recharge. So there's more benefit from an environmental perspective in the natural water course. It just seems so odd that there was this difference. It had to mean something.
So, Grady, let me chime in because my staff person was whispering in my ear that perhaps part of that calculation was related to the fact that at the time the water was already going into the river before the program was established, and there was probably some discussion about should you need to take additional actions, and probably related to what was going on up in the Phoenix AMA with the Phoenix cities doing so much discharge into the river as well prior to the creation of the underground storage and recovery program. So that's probably part of what was the thinking of the differences. John?
Just to add to your other question on there, evapotranspiration of the riverbed is considered and deducted from what's the volume released to the river. So it is calculated losses.
Sandy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And going back to your point about the impact on the overall water budget and accounting for in this case the safe yield goal in Tucson, has the department looked at what that impact might be long term?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll look for that information and see if we have. Other remarks, questions from folks around the table? members on the phone? I know we had some audience members already get up and support both. Are there any audience members that would like to comment on just this proposal? Alex.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Council, for the opportunity to speak in support of this one as well. Most of my comments initially apply to both, provided a little history. So Reclamation does have an obligation to maximize the benefit of our 28,200 acre-feet a year of effluent that we're receiving out of the Ina Road treatment plant along the Santa Cruz River. To that end, we've examined various options and conducted various pilot projects in the area to attempt to maximize the credits earned from that effluent. What it really has come down to is need to pull that water off the river and put it in a constructed facility. We do realize that at the time this was put in place originally, it likely was a case that water was already entering these water courses from treatment facilities, and so the incentive wasn't needed to keep that water in the river. Times have changed, and we're now at a point where the incentive needs to be to keep the water in the river. And that's one reason why we're in support of it. At this point, we currently have rights to about 2/3 of the base flow of the Santa Cruz River, and that's the water that we've been moving forward, trying to find a solution to maximize our credits, and it's coming down to needing to pull it out of the river. We do not want to see that. We think everyone's interests benefit by keeping it in the river, and it certainly does help future projects as well, as mentioned before. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll just add this to your many good comments, Alex. I wanted to focus in on one, and that was the times have changed. That's so much of what this council is about and what the governance process was about. We did things one way for a long time based on what we knew at the time and what we expected at the time, and this is all about, do we need to change our policies and our legal framework because it is a new day. We have more information. We have a clearer picture. And that's a really important point for everyone to keep in mind as we move forward with the work of the council. So others? Anyone else? I see another hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. John Munderloh, Water Resource Manager, Town of Prescott Valley. I'd just like to say, as a manager of a in-channel constructed facility that started out as a managed facility, that we fully support this idea. It is really fairly ridiculous that to chase a few extra credits, we have constructed berms in the narrow channel of the Upper Olafria River that regularly get blown out by storm flows, and then we go in with equipment mired in the mud trying to replace those berms. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, and the best we typically can achieve is maybe about 70% accrual under a constructed system. So thank you for your consideration on this.
Thanks, John. Could I ask John if you have information about the cost that you have to incur to do those things for the constructed? I think it would be helpful for me at least to see that type of information.
Sure, I can send you our budget numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I'm Sonia Perillo with Audubon, Arizona. We also represent the Audubon, Arizona's Western Rivers Action Network, so a couple of hats. I just want to reiterate the value that we see in this for wildlife habitat purposes. Things that incentivize, or in this case, eliminate a disincentive for protecting in-stream flows are incredibly valuable for the wildlife that we care about and also the communities that we care about. We have a largely tourism-based economy. People come here from all over the world to bird in Arizona. They come to hike in our beautiful waterways, and so we see incredible value for both wildlife and people in protecting the in-stream flows in our rivers. So we're very enthusiastic about the opportunity to eliminate a disincentive. Apologies for the double negative.
Another hand in the back.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Council, Christina McVie again for the Coalition, for the Community Water Coalition. I would like to, and Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciated your request of the gentleman from Prescott regarding economics and budget. I think this really is an economic issue. Not only do we have ecosystem services that are provided by leaving water in the river, as Ms. Perillo has referred to, but we have costs, many costs, that are deferred by the ecotourism that this provides, the migratory species that depend on these waters in the river, that provide crop pest control, disease control, things of that nature. We also have a commitment to the Tohono O'odham to protect their lifestyle. These are legal commitments. Without this certainty, if BOR has to remove this water from the river, it will incur a great cost to BOR, not just Southern Arizona. And time is of the essence. This cannot wait. We certainly support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands? So again, I have not heard opposition. So I think we're at hopefully a consensus that this recommendation will move forward to me and formally to the governor's office. I will say that I would like to request folks who have the information that you just talked about, the economic benefits, the ecotourism, economic benefits, things like that. I would definitely like to have that information. From my perspective, I'd like to have more discussion about this in some venue, if not this venue. Certainly when the enhanced aquifer management process was going on, that two former directors ago initiated, there were large concerns addressed in that process about the disconnect between the area of recharge and the area of recovery. And I think we really need to make sure we parse through all of these issues to make the case if that's we're going to change the law in this particular issue. So, with that, I think we're on to agenda item 4, a discussion of the M36 Water Loss Program update, and just remind folks that this ties back into one of the first council report and the recommendation there to look at reducing loss unaccounted for water statewide. So Zach from our staff is going to give the update, and I think you have PowerPoint. Yep, so take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to provide that update, and if I could ask Josh, if you could turn down the lights for me. Please excuse my laziness. But
Hunter's got long arms.
Yeah. yeah. It's a puzzle. That's why he's here, right? Annual activities for the Governor's Water Augmentation Council. One of these were the reason why we were even going through this program in the first place. And everyone has a forgetful memory just like I do, and wondering why this is even on the agenda. It is because we have the task of identifying municipal and private water providers outside of the AMAs whose loss and accounted for water exceeds 10%, and explore with those providers potential actions that may reduce the lost and unaccounted water to below 10%. How do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, we need some partners, and particularly a financial one. So the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona was very happy to partner with us on this program. They provided $75,000 to help finance this program out of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Technical Assistance Set Aside. That's a bit of a mouthful. The Arizona Department of Water Resources, we also contributed $25,000 through our Rural Water Studies Fund. Through this partnership, a request for proposal was handed to the State Procurement Office, and we were able to obtain a very experienced consultant in Kavanaugh who has agreed to conduct the work and the training incorporating water loss auditing software, which we'll go over in a moment. We also have a few organizations that have been conducting similar trainings in the past. ADQ had conducted some water auditing training through their capacity development program. EPA had similar steps that they were taking a long time ago. And AMWA has also been very supportive of a project of this nature. And AZ Water Association as well, interested in championing projects and holding trainings in the future. So the goal, ultimately, is to reduce water loss in Arizona, right? But how do we get there? Well, the key task that we came up with was to develop and implement a targeted water loss control pilot program based on, this is the important part, American Water Works Association's manual for water audits and loss control programs. So there was a manual already designed for this particular type of program called the M36. And it's available online and for paperback, and it's meant to train water utility staff on comprehensive water audits. Right? But how do we have the technical experts to do that and to lead these utilities towards that goal? This is where our program differentiated from many of the others, in that we actually have a consultant that provides the technical experts to walk the utilities through the manual and to implement, to put in their data into a grading matrices. And they're able to accumulate a score and then figure out how they can better that score based on their data inputs. Now, many of you might be wondering, who were the lucky participants? Allow me to share with you. We had three criteria that we were trying to go through ourselves and with on selecting people to reach out to, utilities to reach out to, based on these two things. First one was geographical regions. We wanted it to be diverse geographical regions in the state of Arizona as much as possible, extending from the desert south to the forested north and mountainous north. So we had narrowed an extensive list down to these 6 stars, where the locations of the utilities are, and the second criteria was whether or not they had water loss of greater than 10% and unaccounted for. And thirdly was determining the size of the utility. Is it a small utility or a large one? And we wanted to incorporate small ones and large ones in this process. As a result, the volunteers for this program turned to be AZ Water, the Pine Strawberry Irrigation District, Global Water Resources down in Tonopah, City of Flagstaff, City of Kingman, and Clarkdale. Since then, we started the program kickoff in August. We had a workshop around that time in the Prescott Public Library. And there's a period of data gathering, a little bit of homework for the utilities throughout the months of the fall. Kavanaugh provided analysis of that data. Recently, we had a on-site technical work session, just these past 2 days, actually. Very recent. Both Martin and I were present for that, just to ensure that utilities were happy with the program and they were getting some extra knowledge out of it, and that they would recommend it. The utilities I had talked to, based on their feedback, it was very positive. So I consider it a success in my book. And then after the on-site technical work sessions, expect post-work sessions based on the work that was done at the workshop, what tweaks need to be made to the data to make it more accurate, how to patch in some of the holes in that data, followed by a post-session survey in which we'll get more feedback from the utilities about their experience. So these past 2 days, just to dive into what it is that they were talking about, they were developing inputs, validity scoring, supply meter verification methods. These were all presentations that were given to the utilities from Kavanaugh. The exercises were broken up into 3 different groups. So you had diverse utilities paired together, small to large utilities, public and private utilities, so that they can all learn from each other in the breakout groups. Populating top-down audit inputs in these exercises, using that software, developing grades for the matrix, utilizing their data, and then assessing the next steps for that data validity for the next month here. And with that, if somebody has any questions, you feel free to ask me right now, or you can email me utilizing my email address there later on if you would like.
So before I ask for questions, comments from the council, I'll ask Zach. So at what point are we going to potentially see numbers that show how successful this is in terms of saving water? Where is that in the process?
In terms of saving water, you can see this like post-session surveys, basically like their experience, but in terms of how they can save water in the future, first they have to figure out the loss and unaccounted for and where that loss is.
Thanks. So, around the table, members of the council, questions, comments? Warren.
Certainly think this is a great effort and a good program. It's something that the AMWA cities and I know other municipalities, particularly in Central Arizona or in the AMAs, have been working on and looking at how to keep their water loss below 10% according to the ADWR rules. And I think this is great to get this information out there to have rural utilities work on it. I think based on what I understand here, it's clear that looking at water loss control goes beyond just trying to get to a number of a percentage number, and that there's a lot of opportunities for utilities to increase their efficiency of their water. And I'm hopeful that this might be a program that can be expanded and could also even include the whole state, even those that are in the AMAs. And the reason why is we just visited earlier this week with members that were interested in looking how to increase their efforts on water loss control. And it was clear from the discussion that there's a lot of room for improvement and also room for opportunity to improve water efficiency. Even though all of our members are below the 10%, there's clearly is still opportunity for greater efficiency. So I'm really glad to see this program working. I'm trusting that it will produce good results with those utilities that participated. And again, I hope it will be something that we can look at for expanding.
Thanks, Warren. And I would ask you to get together with Zach and work with him on how this could be made more useful for AMWA and its members. Sarah.
Just a quick question, really two. The first is, have you involved the Corporation Commission in this process? And second, I remember that the total potential savings from better control over water loss was quantified, I think, at the first meeting of this group, and I think it was 200,000 acre feet per year or something like that. But have you looked at that again? Is that still the going idea that we have about how much can be essentially achieved or yielded?
So I actually presented that information in our very first workshop that we had with the utilities back in August. I can provide that slide to you and all the information. It's based on Commissioner Tobin's a letter he put out way back last summer, I believe. And yeah, that was our greatest reasoning for taking on a program of this nature was, look, we have all these losses because of the loss on unaccounted for water, and that we can do something about it through this program. So the ACC has been involved throughout the duration of this program. They have a representative, Andrew, I forget his last name, but he has been at every workshop with us. So.
Thanks. Sandy.
Just real quick, thanks, Zach, for the presentation. It was very helpful, and hopefully get a lot of really good information out of this. Is there any thought to expand this beyond utilities, water utilities, so any industrial or irrigation? There's been some irrigation work done in the past through the conservation program, but I'm just curious if there's opportunities to expand it beyond just municipal uses.
So I would say the answer is yes. I would like to have DWR staff assess the potential for those sectors. Again, focusing at least in the early part on where the biggest potential is probably is the best bang for the buck, so to speak. So while continuing this program, which is already up and running. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo what Warren was on behalf of Southern Arizona Water Association, what Warren has commented on from AMWA. Any information that you guys or any new knowledge that you obtain during this process would be great to all of our members as well. I know this is a moving target, and efficiencies changes and water loss management technologies changes, so we look forward to hopefully your success as you continue with this. And SAWA is made up of urban and rural water companies, so this will benefit our membership greatly. Thank you.
Anyone else around the table? Any council member on the phone? Since we do have a representative of Flagstaff here, I'm going to put him on the spot and ask him if he would like to comment on the utility of this program for Flagstaff.
Sure. So Brad Hill, I'm the Director of Water Services for the city. Since becoming director about 7 years ago and coming from the AMAs, I've been really concerned about water loss in our community. And we actually sent 5 staff to this yesterday, ranging from our distribution, production, billing, and water resource management. I just had a brief opportunity in the parking lot last night as they came home, returned home from that, and they were very energetic and very energized. And I really would like to thank the department for the opportunity of our staff for hosting this and for bringing this kind of information and training opportunities out to outside of the AMAs, and in particular to Northern Arizona. So thank you.
Thanks, Brad. And we put this slide back up just in case there are any members in the audience who are part of these organizations. If so, I'd love to hear from you as well. I don't see anyone volunteering, but thanks, Brad. So with that, we're going to move on to item 5, the next steps. The next steps are the committees continuing to meet and do their work. And I will reach out to the committee chairs for their feedback on when they believe they have substantive or action items to bring back to the council, or when they believe important updates of the council's work are ripe for review by the council. And based on that feedback, we'll set the next meeting. Does that work well for folks? Especially my chairs, they're shaking their heads yes. So I think with that, one last opportunity for the public to speak. I want to thank all the council members for their participation, and especially the audience members. This has probably been the most interactive meeting we've had of the council since we started it, so I much appreciate it, and thank you all.